and you had a lot of people who were really talented guys.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably know a lot of them. You're really talented guys who came up with just phenomenal offerings, a lot of talent into those types of businesses where they saw an opportunity to own and drive their own gig almost, and bring their own interpretation of food to the masses. The whole Mitchell and Butler's business began to realise was the future completely lay in this kind of food sector, and being able to kind of marry the two pieces together.
Welcome back to the Chef JKP Podcast. And on the show today, we have the honor of having the CEO of Chef Middle East, Steve Pyle. Steve, welcome to the show.
Morning, James. Thank you for having me on.
So, first things first, before we get into everything to do with Chef Middle East, what's your first or favorite ever childhood food memory?
Oof. So I think my mother would kill me when she hears this. So my brother and I were kind of almost brought up by our grandparents. We spent a lot of time with them, and they were both. So there was not much money around, but they were both sort of kitchen bodies. So we kind of grew up on. So we grew up in Aberdeen. So very close to, so it was a big fishing port at that time, very close to the sea. And my grandfather would constantly appear with kind of bags of kind of newspaper wrapped fish. So they would bake that, fry that, grill that. And I suppose the constant that would be on every day is they would make soup. And I can always look back and think at the time how simple it was, but also how, I suppose, nutritious it was. So both of I'm sure this is not necessarily just the reason, but so my grandfather's still alive. He's 98 years old.
Oh my God, amazing.
And my grandmother, she sadly passed away about 4 or 5 years ago, but they both had long lives. And that their kind of diet continued in a really similar vein almost all our lives. And he still, I can see it with him even to this day, makes his own soup, starts with, he has a kind of a discipline. I think he's less disciplined than he probably was when my grandmother was alive. But no, that was kind of, I guess just comfort,
right,
was how the kind of memory, I guess, that it evokes.
But also having those sorts of, that fish, because also Scotland is known for incredible fish, of course. Sure.
Yeah.
So that must have been really, really nice. And also the weather we know is,
grim.
Grumpy, I like to call it. So then, what were the types of food as an adolescent growing up? What types of food were you into?
Look, I think a bit like everybody else who was in my kind of peer group, I suppose, at that time, it was whatever I could put my hands on. So it was a combination of probably my grandparents and my mother always kind of, so that's where the nutrition was, and then anything else we could get our hands on. And Scottish cuisine is not exactly known for being, I suppose I better be careful what I say here, but fantastically adventurous. So we were, I guess, when we had the money to kind of go and buy food, it was lots of fish, but fish and chips, and I guess comfort food. So we spent, I guess, my brother and I, a lot of time playing sport when we were kids, and I think food as fuel was really important for us. So just being able to fill up on whatever we had close at hand. And I think, thankfully for us, the influence of sort of my parents and my grandparents were probably more prevalent than our own choices at that point in our lives.
So then when you went into sort of your education,
Sure.
high school, college, so on and so forth, was hospitality the choice, or did you go into something different?
No, hospitality was the choice. And I think it began a little bit of a love affair. The whole experience of going through college began this kind of, or started, I suppose, this enjoyment of taking raw ingredients and be able to play with them a little bit, and sometimes successfully, sometimes not so much. But a real interest in ingredients in food, and really, I didn't stray too far from simple, taking a piece of fish and grilling it, and playing a little bit with fruit and vegetables. But it certainly, that's something that's continued through life. So in terms of through education.
And what was it that you did specifically when in college?
So I did the completely unrelated to hospitality. I did law and politics.
Oh wow!
So some would say that politics has served me well in terms of the kind of environment I now find myself in. I'm not so sure, but yeah. So I had worked in some restaurant businesses and lots of pub businesses through my sort of student life, and had really enjoyed that environment.
Whilst you were studying?
Whilst I was studying, and at the point I graduated, I was offered a job with Diageo, who bought a business called Allied Domecq. So sort of fell into the world of beverage. Those businesses at that point in time were beginning to dabble in not just so the kind of brewing of drinks, but also owning and developing pub and restaurant businesses.
Right.
And I sort of, well, I wouldn't say fell into it. By choice, I really enjoyed the atmosphere of not just pub businesses, but some of the kind of pub restaurant businesses that were beginning to evolve. This is back in the, I guess, late 80s, early 90s in the UK. So that was something that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the experience of, and the camaraderie and the team spirit that you felt in some of those operations for me was something that I really enjoyed. The kind of the product was probably at that point in time was less of an interest, less of a concern, but just the kind of the experiences that were being created in those businesses was interesting for me.
So then, Steve, so for people who are not aware, obviously you went into Diageo, who are, as you said, in the beverage sector.
Yeah.
Obviously enjoyed the hospitality side of things, and you, as you said, developing teams, being with the teams, so on and so forth.
Sure.
Then, and how did you move from to Mitchell and Butler? Because they were a huge sort of brewing company, if you like.
Yeah. So they were. I mean, this was quite a historic time in the whole kind of brewing industry in the UK, because it was when the Monopolies and Mergers Commission deemed that you could not have this kind of estate of pubs and restaurants and be a brewer. So they split. You had to split the businesses. So what was Bass, the old Midlands-based brewer, split into initially they were Six Continents Retail, and then they became Mitchells and Butler, which Mitchells and Butler was the old operating co, or the opco, that was based in the Midlands.
Right.
And then became, and Mitchell and Butler, I think to this day, still remains the kind of the name of the business that operates. Well, you will know, I mean, a high number of So I mean, and a vast array of different, I guess, beverage to food and some very high end kind of gastropub offerings in the UK and beyond. So I was responsible for a group of pub businesses in the old Allied Domecq, so the Diageo business, and then went to join Michelin Butler really as an opportunity, as a piece of advancement. Really, they'd begun to toy with branding pubs and branding concepts. So you began to see businesses like some of these I think still exist. So brands like All Bar One, O'Neill's, Edwards, Alex. There were a few different ones.
Right.
So that they began to evolve this and build this kind of branded estate of public houses, of restaurant businesses, which was quite unique at that point in time. So you had, I mean, it was a steer away from, the Red Lion and the kind of the horse, the ship and anchor and. So from a personal perspective, it really began to instill in me this kind of you can play a little bit with brands and what they and almost kind of what they become, what they mean to customers over a period of time, and I guess it also instilled in me this kind of discipline around what's really important to make sure you get right, and how you over time you build continuity and consistency so that the experience that the consumer is getting remains stable.
But I remember at that time, the focus also, when you're talking about those brands, it wasn't, so of course you had the beverage side of it, which was incredibly strong.
Yeah.
But what emerged was that also the gastropub era was born.
Yeah.
So it meant that pub food, or British pub food that used to be not so great, then all of a sudden started to really develop into something very, very high.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is quite interesting for me. I think what began to happen was, you had this kind of real upsurge in interest in the whole, just the culinary industry, and it was kind of becoming, it was the beginning of cool culinary in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And that kind of talent found its way out of the kind of traditional kind of routes to market. So whether it be, very smart hotels or very traditional restaurant businesses, and they began to find their own way because the opportunity was being presented into their own businesses. So an awful lot of what felt like the very old kind of pub businesses were transformed, both in terms of how they looked and what they did, into these kind of gastropub offerings. And you had a lot of people who were really talented guys.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably know a lot of them. You're really talented guys who came up with just phenomenal offerings.
Yeah,
Really
absolutely.
phenomenal
Because also I just remember there were a lot of, as you said, young culinary talents who were sort of becoming semi-landlords, if you like, and were really pushing the boundaries of a Sunday lunch, of so many things.
Yeah.
And it was a really interesting time, and that's when you had the likes of Tom Kerridge and all these kinds of people coming in and really changing the entire landscape of pubs.
And you got, I mean, from personal experience, you got to try things at a price point that you might never have even experienced before that point in time. So it was almost kind of like the democratizing of real food in the UK in many ways. As you say, the country had a reputation for being absolutely average.
Yes. Yeah.
But this point in time, you saw this almost this kind of flood of talent into those types of businesses where they saw an opportunity to own and drive their own gig almost, and bring their own interpretation of food to the masses. And some of them did phenomenally well.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah.
So during your tenure, what were you sort of responsible for, and which areas?
So in the Michelin Butler,
Yes.
stuff. So I looked after. So I was what they called so I started as an area manager. I became what they called a D&GM. So basically a general manager. So responsible for a team of people who were responsible for, and it used to be split geographically. So they would look after anything from what you'd call, straightforward high street unbranded pub offerings, through to so there was something called Ember Inns, which was this kind of, you'll know it, so sort of suburban, sort of upscale, bit casual dining, formal, I say semi-formal, and so I had a sort of a spectrum of those types of businesses that I looked after. So some that were very so beverage oriented, and others that and others that were kind of highly food oriented. And what the business as a whole, the whole Michelin Butler's business, began to realise was the future completely lay in this kind of food sector, and being able to kind of marry the two pieces together. So and you saw this across pub businesses all over the UK at that time. The kind of the pub that was almost a feature of every corner on every estate, whether in smart areas or not so smart areas, they became less and less viable businesses, because people, the investment in and the quality of the estate that the likes of Michelin Butler, and there were others, began to build, became so compelling.
Because it was just such an interesting time, as you said, because there were so many pubs which were run down and not great, and then somebody came in and just gave it so much life and injected so much into the area.
Yep.
So then if we fast forward into 2014.
Yeah.
Now tell me how you started within Chef Middle East.
So the Chef Middle East business was established in 1995 here in the UAE, and it had passed through a number of hands of different entrepreneurs, and the business had become sizable and developed a reputation, and it had reached. And it had also managed to kind of put a footprint in both, by that time, both in Oman and in Qatar. So it wasn't a small business. It was probably 20-25% of where it is today. So I became part of a team that looked to acquire the business. So I joined the business just after it was acquired by a private equity firm here in the UAE, and then began the journey really of trying to, so importantly, build a team, and really develop a kind of a stronger link. So the business at that time, in my view, was highly product focused. The kind of engagement with culinary community was challenged. So we began this kind of journey of really broadening the proposition, but also bringing people into the business who could make this connection with guys in kitchens and restaurateurs and hoteliers.
So back then, with 10 years ago,
Yeah.
how would you describe the gastronomic landscape then?
Yeah, it's very different. I think it was combination of things. I think there was much of what we saw was highly hotel oriented, and there was I think people who wanted to pursue a career in kitchens often saw that as being the best route to follow. You began to see, it was around about that time actually, so 2013, 2014, you began to see this influx of primarily American franchised brands into this marketplace. So there was a significant investment in franchised operations at that point in time. So you saw the influx of, I mean, there are a number. Okay. So and from QSR through to upscale casual, and it did genuinely, in my view, it broadened the kind of the food service ecosystem. I think the next stage in this market's development was that you had this kind of, I don't want to say it wasn't a rebellion, but I think people had this sense that what they were getting was this kind of deja vu that was very, very kind of grey coloured. They'd seen it and they'd seen it and they'd seen it again. And you started to feel that there was a space that could be occupied by some entrepreneurial thinking, and there was also this kind of sense that there was a kind of a premiumization of dining beginning to happen. So I think the combination of those two things meant that it felt like lots of entrepreneurial, independent restaurateurs who saw an opportunity in the market, and I think at all levels on the spectrum, from QSR businesses, very kind of fast casual businesses, right to the kind of really sexy top end white tablecloth operations, and distinct and set aside from hotel businesses. And I think over time that has continued to evolve, and in many ways it's shaped how we think about the world inside the Chef Middle East business, because it's really changed the way we think about the kind of what's out there, or the customer. You know, how do we become a more important part of this overall kind of ecosystem, and how do we make connection with those individuals who were driving so much of the change that was happening?
So, Steve, I'm going to ask you a bit of a silly question. For those people who are not aware, predominantly, what is Chef Middle East and what do you do?
Sure. So, I mean, look, we're an importer of ingredients so from all over the world, we will import ingredients and we store and distribute to our kind of customer base. So our kind of customer count is something like 4,000 distinct accounts, and we service those across what we call 8 or 9 kind of food category groups. So from protein through seafood, pastry, bakery, et al. So we started life genuinely as a cheese and chocolate business,
right?
And that's evolved as the customer has evolved. As I say, we pretty much now cover a spectrum of 8 to 9 different categories. So anything from a pot of mustard through a bottle of oil to a piece of Wagyu tomahawk. You'll find that we have that in our portfolio of products.
And in how many countries or do you distribute to? So
at the moment we distribute to 3 countries. So So the maximum which we built the business has always been about having this kind of proximity to customers. So service is a really important part of the DNA of the business. And although we export into Seychelles and Maldives, and we do that on an ongoing basis and have done for a number of years. But the core of our business, the epicenter of our business, is really here in the UAE, in Doha, in Muscat and Salalah, and it's having that, when the restaurateur or the hotelier or the guy who stands in their kitchen realizes at 5 to 12 on a Friday afternoon that he's forgotten something.
We've all been there.
Yeah,
we've all been there.
We are one of his go-tos. We are, we will find a way to support them, and we try to work with those guys as partners. I think one of the and this is right at the kind of center of our whole ethos and the way we think about how we bring people into our business. So that there's a lot of, I think, sometimes nonsense talked about service as a skill or as a quality inside individuals, because I think sometimes it gets mixed up with being servile and providing something that is an enabler. And we really try to find people who see that, they see benefit, they see opportunity in being able to provide service, in being able to enable guys who stand in kitchens over stove to do what they do best, to create, to impress their guests. So that we have a small number of countries. We have a huge number of countries from where we source product. So I don't know. We're probably in somewhere between 80 and 100 countries that we import product from. But in terms of the countries we're in, it's focused primarily at the moment. It's focused on these 3 or 4 key GCC areas.
Because I was going to say, just as I was listening to you there, sort of reminiscing back, it does happen when on a Friday or a weekend or wherever it may be, you've forgotten something because you're so busy and you're just like, oh my God. And it used to be that if you call on a Friday or whatever it may be, you would literally get refused. Sorry, it's a cut-off. The salesperson and the logistics person has gone home for the day. You'll have to, so that was infuriating at times, but also from yourself because you forgot, but also that you've got customers to deal with. So then for you to pivot the business, to have that connection with the chefs and the restaurateurs, to have those salespeople or those key members of staff who the warehouse will be open, we can help, whatever you need to do, that must put you in a very different league business-wise, because it means that people will literally think of only you to help them.
Yeah, I wish it were that simple. I think we've worked really hard at that. It's something that we try to instill in everybody who comes into our building to work for the business. The guy whom you help when he's really in a corner will think of you in a very different way from everybody else.
100%.
And look, we have that. This is something that we have a guy who's our head of ops, who's been with us for 10 years. He's a pretty rough around the edges. He's a kind of a proper hardcore operator. The thing I love about him is he thinks about cost, but he thinks about customer first.
Wow.
And if that means he has to, on a Saturday night, he has to open the warehouse at 2 a.m. because somebody's ringing him to say, I need whatever it be, he does it. And look, we have we're really super fortunate, James. We have a bunch of people in our sales organization who, they will find a way, whether they do it themselves, whether they have to go and find a driver to take a truck to kind of get this done, whether it's, the first, second or third delivery on any given day. We're blessed to a certain extent with people who see that as being a really important part of what they do.
But I think that sets you apart from everybody else.
Yeah, and look, we're a long way from being perfect. But I think in terms of mentality, it's an important part of who we are.
But I agree with you, because as you know, within the thousands of restaurants that you have within the UAE, there's always something going on. There's a VIP coming in. There's a last minute request, and as a matter of fact, that your team are able to be so flexible, specifically with chefs, because they can be a bit hard headed and a bit stubborn and a bit sharp at times. That sort of service, in my opinion, really does set you apart, because people will really be like, do you know what? If I'm ever in trouble, I know that Chef Middle East are going to help me.
Yeah, look, it's important to the business. There are a number of different ways you can look at these and measure these businesses, and we always try to think about this, or put yourself in the boots of, and look at it through the lens of a customer and what's important to them. And of course, you have on the spectrum of things that are important for them, you have quality of product, there's kind of price, but the relationship and the service that you provide to those people is a really important component of how they measure you as a partner, as a supplier. So it's something we don't, we get it wrong a lot, but we are consistently trying to learn from that, and we genuinely look for, when we're hiring people, we look for people who have this kind of innate sense of, I really want to get it right for this group of people whom I'm going to work with.
And it's really refreshing that also the sales team don't just necessarily want to sell, but they also want to help you to find a solution. Yeah. Because I think that's really key, and it's not easy with salespeople to have that at times, especially from a food distribution perspective.
Sure. Look, I think this is, we talk about this a lot, that we are solution providers for partners, and that's not just at a product level. It's the whole enchilada. It's the whole piece. It's how we treat them. It's how we use our facility. Dare I say it, sometimes to educate. So we have a facility up there, and we have chefs who work inside our business, who are ready to let people play around with product from the warehouse on a day-to-day basis, to engineer the proposition, or even if it's just to sample something that they want to change out what they're currently doing. It's an integral part of what we try to do, and I think we really place a lot of importance on the individuals inside the business, or particularly when we're trying to recruit people who have this sense of, I really want to build relationships. I want to genuinely get inside the head of this guy who's my customer, and give him more than just products. Just give him options, give him solutions, to your point.
But also, what I find quite interesting is that you're a well-established business, but also recently there was a major acquisition within the business from Chef's Warehouse.
Yeah.
Now tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So you'll be conscious of this. So the previous owners, investors, were a private equity firm. they were always going to exit, and to a certain extent, the adjuncts or the pandemic slowed that process down. And we had a number of people looking at the business. Chef's Warehouse, although they're the other side of the world, felt like a very natural fit for us in a number of different ways. The Chef's Warehouse story is a long one, but they, and I'll try and do the kind of 2-minute skinny on them. So the business was founded by two brothers. The elder brother came to Europe to play professional basketball X number of years ago, and he fell in love with some of the ingredients that he found that he'd never seen before or had seen very little of in the US. And the story goes something along the lines of I think his father mortgaged his house to allow him to build the cash to be able to import a container of oils, mustards, vinegars, etc. And that's how that business started. But when I look at if I just look at it from a product standpoint, we share a huge number of brands, and their kind of go-to-market has always been this speciality first, and then this kind of broad line of products that support the needs of the chef. Because if I'm going to buy saffron and octopus and sea bream and wagyu from you, why wouldn't I also buy butter and cheese and salt and rice? So that this, I suppose, speciality kind of broad line ticket, which seems like a really odd juxtaposition of terms, works for them, and it works in the same way for us. And really, it's driven by the customer. It's driven by the chef who's saying, look, if you're coming here with this that I deem to be, very high-end chocolate and puree and whatever else it be, why wouldn't I buy this other range of canned tomato, etc., etc. So there was a lot of synergy in terms of what they looked like from a product standpoint, but also from an organisational standpoint, sort of very similar. So that it felt like, and this is always I think in all these types of transactions, it's always a tricky time, because the people inside our business whom we had a long relationship with, and it's probably a cliche to say, it feels like a family, but we'd known a lot of these people for a long time, and we'd taken, particularly from a sales standpoint, we'd taken a lot of these guys out of college. They jumped through 2 or 3 different positions inside the business, and it was obviously, change is scary for everybody. So there was a little bit of, I suppose, concern about what would happen once we become part of this much bigger entity. So I guess a year on, James. So they bought the business in November 22. We're fortunate in many ways. So I think they think about the business along similar lines, certainly from a product standpoint, and it's helped us, I guess, broaden our horizons in many ways. So we hold 4,000 to 5,000 SKUs in our business. These guys hold 25,000 SKUs in their business. It's huge,
right?
And so that opportunity just to look at, what works for you guys, and look, we service very different markets, but there's an awful lot of overlap.
So you must have a lot of synergies together, right?
Yeah, and it's not just product. It's product is one piece, but it's also thinking about how they go to market from a customer standpoint, how we add brands into or products into the business. One of the big benefits for us as a business is when so a year and a half ago now, so prior to the transaction or the acquisition by CW, we were kind of out of space in every market. So we kind of reached this we were butting against the ceiling in terms of capacity. In all three of the markets that we operate in, so in Oman, in Qatar, and here in the UAE, we're doubling that capacity. We're already sort of halfway through the development in the UAE, so we're basically extending the existing facility we have up in DIP2, and we're doing a similar thing in the other markets. So that will just give us, I mean, it's a number of different things it gives us, but it will give us this opportunity to explore some of the experience, some of the products that the guys in the US have already made work. So it gives us just an opportunity to not say play around, but really to offer the customers we have here just a little bit of something different.
It's also quite interesting because for people who don't know, again, Chef's Warehouse is exactly what Chef Middle East is, but they're based in the US.
Sure. Yeah.
They're a machine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it must also, you're going into different specialty products. You're expanding the warehouse, which is already huge. I've been there. It's massive. So the fact that you're already doubling up, it must give you some really incredible opportunities to also hit different markets. And as you said, to have so many different products and developments. So it's quite an exciting time.
Massively. I think, there's a number of different opportunities. I think it's this, we felt for perhaps, as we came out of COVID and we went through this kind of process of recovery and trying to stand up again on our hind legs and demonstrate a little bit of, I suppose, resilience, really. This last couple of years, I think, has been a completely different experience. So it's been much more about, actually, we have this opportunity to shape our future in a slightly different way. And it's, this is not going to be completely left field. So we're not going to start selling, semiconductors. It's just the world of food as we know it, as a food distributor, almost becomes, it's like 5x, 4x, 5x, 6x.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have, and really it gives us a set of opportunities to talk to customers in a slightly different way. So a great example of that is, so we had two of the protein team from the US here with us during Gulf Food last week, and protein for us is a relatively small part of what we do, because it's relatively new to us. So it's like 20% of our overall revenue. But they are encouraging us and helping us to broaden our horizons, and they have this experience and expertise that will really accelerate the way that we think about how we bring product to that space, to this market, and really look at the way that we source product for different customers in a slightly different way.
So the other question I sort of popped up because it's important. Now, when it comes to sustainability practices,
sure,
there are two for me majors. Number one, you have human sustainability, which means part of your teams. But it sounds like Chef Middle East is the type of company that encourages growth within the company, and also, if there are any issues, you seem to be able to sustain your team in a great thing. But the other thing I wanted to sort of touch upon into a little bit more detail with you is, because you're such a big company when it comes to food, what are the types of sustainability practices that you've seen over the years and that are coming in from a government perspective?
Sure. So take those two pieces separately. I think from a people standpoint, it's really been the way that we've always done what we've done. These businesses are people businesses, and you kind of live or die based on the quality of the people that you have inside the business, and helping them, giving them the freedom or the opportunity to grow. And I think we can definitely get better at that, and we're investing a lot of money in that particular piece. So that's always going to be core to what we do. The whole sustainability story for us is really interesting one. So it's I suppose we look at it internally as this kind of, it's the balance between business continuity and risk management.
Yeah.
So you kind of have this. We have a unique opportunity to kind of imagine or think about what the kind of the future food service landscape is going to look like, and how important sustainability and CSR and even issues like sort of local production, how those pieces form a part of what we do. And it's trying to anticipate, what customer needs are going to be, and how they see the future of food and of food service. So that's one side of the is one side of the kind of coin, I guess. The other side is just, we've been talking a lot about this internally, and you think about your relevance in a particular space. So you think about Nokia, that was just a huge business 10 years ago or 15 years ago at the outset of the whole mobile phone revolution and communication revolution. And that's a business that you just never hear of now. And we are conscious that you're that far away all the time from becoming irrelevant. And it's trying to understand how you can be part of the change and be part of the ecosystem. And it's I think we are we're making small steps internally. So we're trying to educate some people. I mean, what's interesting for me is there's a generation of people inside our business for whom this is really important. And I'm ashamed to say that it took me a long time to really understand why this is going to be important. I mean, aside from the obvious stuff, but I think I start to see now that unless we begin to build the right level of credentials and the kind of commitment that you need, then you can edge yourselves out of the ecosystem that's becoming more and more important here. And I think it's interesting for me, James, and I'm really this is a conversation for us to have perhaps at another juncture, but how the whole F&B landscape here is trying to wrap their head around this, because you seem to have different parts of it are moving at different paces.
Absolutely.
And we see you have certain hotels groups here now who are actually asking you, as part of doing QA audits, what's your CR, what's your CSR policy? What are you doing? Do you have any kind of distinct sustainability issues? How are you sourcing? What are you doing about, a number of different issues? It's becoming a
no polystyrene with the deliveries, so on and so forth.
Packaging is huge. Yeah. So we recognise we have to be part of the change, and also we see it as an opportunity, because there will come a time, I'm almost certain, where certain customer groups here will say to you, look, we cannot work with you anymore because you don't have X or Y from a sustainability standpoint. And that's quite a stark bit of it's a stark thought when you think that you could almost be excluded because you don't work in a particular way, behave in a particular way, or even do what you do in a particular way. So, and I mean, some of the obvious stuff. So yeah, we have a huge fleet of vehicles. So I don't know, we have across the business. We have 100 vehicles, and it's more expensive at the moment to run those vehicles. So to turn the fleet electric is it's expensive to do, and particularly in an environment like this where fossil fuel remains incredibly cheap. But I'm sure there's going to come a time where we're just going to have to transit. We're going to have to go through this. This is what we have today, and this is kind of electric fleet, and over time we're going to have to think about.
But it's baby steps, though, isn't it?
Sure, and it's just the willingness to kind of accept
the change
that this has changed. It's important, we cannot allow ourselves to become extinct. Because we don't accept that this is part of how we do what we do. So it's just change.
Wow.
It's just change.
The other thing I wanted to sort of touch upon, which I think is particularly interesting, especially from a chef's perspective or a restaurateur's perspective, you talk a lot, Steve, about connection with the customer. Now, recently you held 2 incredible events, and they were called Crave. And for people who are not aware, I was fortunate enough to be part of the event, and I think it should be, sung more of, because in this event, it was purely about connection. It was some of the best produce I've ever seen and tasted. And I just wanted to sort of understand from your point of view, why is it important to Chef Middle East to have these kind of events where suppliers, chefs, restaurateurs, they all get together and celebrate food?
That's great. It's a great question. And we've played around with the format of these types of events over time. So we kind of, and we've evolved, because let's say 7 or 8 years ago, we almost saw Golf Food, which was last week or the week before last week, as being the medium or the venue or the method that we would connect a lot of suppliers with customers. But it was a little bit ad hoc for us, because we didn't know who was going to come, and we didn't know which suppliers would really come to Golf Food or wanted to be involved in it. What we've done with these sort of bespoke events, and we spoke a little bit about this at the time, is it gives us an opportunity in a structured way to plug 2 really important communities for us. So the community that's represented by the kind of culinary sort of customers that we have, and this supply chain that we have that has this just unbelievable sort of repository of technical knowledge and we think we understand the products that we bring to market, but these guys just they're in a different stratosphere in terms of understanding, as you'd expect.
But they're the owners of the products that you're bringing, right?
Yeah, totally. They understand it better than anybody else in the world, and being able to plug those 2 pieces together, those 2 communities of interest together, is, I mean, it's really important for us, and it's really important for 2 reasons. It allows both of those communities to get a better understanding of each other and what they might do together, and for us, they both see us as being this bridge that helps them make that connection. So look, we try to build these events and get and we've done a number of different things. We've done master classes in the past. We've done all the stuff that you saw when you were there last 2 or 3 weeks ago. So where we are showcasing just amazing ingredients, and actually how, you know, it's more than just the kind of, you know, there's a station here that has seafood, and there's a station here that has protein, and he's trying to talk to how might you put some of these things together to create something that's more than just the single ingredient itself.
But what felt so special about that event, Steve, is the fact that it wasn't that people were trying to sell to me. It felt like a celebration of food. It felt like a food festival. Everyone was having a great time, a nice chat. I mean, entertainment around. There was one guy doing like cartoons for people.
Sure.
It had such an amazing feel to the place, and I think that's what made it stand out for me, certainly. And
if you go right back to what we talked about right at the beginning of this, in terms of the ambience that you know, if I think about some of my memories in this industry and the places where you feel most comfortable, whether it be in pubs or in restaurants or hotels or whatever it be, there's an ambience that you associate with being comfortable and being entertained and being engaged. And that's what we were trying to do with these events, is just to make it more than just about we have this, do you want to buy it? It's, here's an opportunity for you to learn. Here's an opportunity for you to see, to taste, to try something, and to talk to somebody who's going to know more than anybody else you'll ever talk to about this particular product or this particular brand. So look, it is genuinely an opportunity for us to, and I don't want this to sound as though we're somehow trying to lord over people, but just give people an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the products, about the brands, about what we do, in an environment that is makes people start to think about. I mean, most of the people come through that door, certainly most of the guys who come out of kitchens, they're creators, and it's just, you walk into that event with a blank page, and you might walk out with half a dozen ideas, and if we've managed to give that to people, happy days.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic event, and looking forward to more of those in the future because they're really incredible. Now, the other thing I wanted to sort of ask you, Steve, is now nobody teaches you how to be a CEO, right? Now, you run a big company, you have a phenomenal team behind you, but from a personal point of view, I wanted to ask you how much of your job is strategic led, because we've discussed a lot of topics, and in my head I'm just thinking there's a lot of foresight that comes ahead, as you said, the sustainability piece, or the fact that you're only so far away from being Nokia. So it's not just necessarily about knowing all the phenomenal products that you have. It's also about having to think so far ahead, because it's really a lot.
Look, I think doing this job is almost entirely about people, but being able to ask and having confidence to ask questions that help inform you about what the next 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years might look like. So that, I think, that element of how you plan, how you build this different future is in some ways is derivative of the quality of the people that you've got inside the business, because what you're trying to do really is build 10 or 15 or 20 strategists who all have a view, and hopefully they have a conflicting view of what the future might hold, because that debate, that argument, that frustration sometimes with each other forges better decisions.
Yeah, true.
And look, I spend a lot of my time it sounds like a daft thing to say. I mean, figuratively, I spend a lot of my time putting on white gloves and getting between people because they, people inside the business, they hold quite strong views,
opinions
about what's right, wrong, and otherwise.
Right.
And look, from a personal perspective, I'm hugely proud of the fact that actually people care enough to argue about we should go left, not right. We should go this way, not that way. So that's something that will continue to foster. And I think from a Chef Middle East perspective, I think the advent of having the Chef's Warehouse influence, experience, is just another layer that we have an opportunity to learn from what they've done, how they've done, and also this kind of enthusiasm to want to grow, to be able to be a part of a I don't know, a bigger but a better future in this landscape that we operate in this part of the world.
Well, that's the next thing I was sort of wanted to ask you is, you've been in the region for some time.
Yeah.
You've seen all of the operators. You saw what was happening 10 years ago. Now, how do you see the future of F&B in this region?
Look, I think if you look at the government, so the key government bodies, and forgive me if I miss any of these, but if you look at Qatar, you look at Muscat, you look at this country, and importantly, you look at Saudi, without exception, every single one of those countries, the governments of those businesses, see F&B and tourism as a really important strategic pillar in terms of how they're going to grow over the course of the next 5, 10, 20 years. And my perspective, which I think is phenomenally healthy, I mean, the Dubai story is just an incredible story. It's unique. And if you think about what's happening, beginning to happen now in Saudi, who'd bet against the same sort of thing happening again in what is a geography that's relatively small and not really, I mean, naturally kind of carved out to be this kind of incredible tourist destination, but it's almost the kind of having the vision, the commitment, the investment to be able to do those things have paid huge dividends for this country and the reputation it has across the rest of the world. And I'm sure the same is going to happen in other parts of the GCC. So our opportunity really is to take that understanding and figure out, where we fit into that piece of thinking and what it is that we can do that brings a little bit of different, a little bit of added value, a little bit of opportunity for the other players in the ecosystem to help them develop, help them grow, help them kind of succeed. So that's how we, that's from an internal perspective in terms of the people piece, but also, we are fortunate enough to be in a geography that just has there's a huge momentum that's building around all things tourism and F&B.
And you can't ignore it. It's massive.
No.
It's huge.
No, it's I mean, James, you must, because I know you talk to chefs, guys who stand in kitchens multiple times during the course of these conversations, and you're in it yourself. You understand this. Just the number of opportunities, the number of businesses that are either being evolved, developed, or actually just getting themselves off the ground is phenomenal. It's a huge number, a huge opportunity, and I think the quality of those startups now, if you cast your mind back 5 years, is very different. So people are more sophisticated. People have better investors, stronger investment. They have a clearer vision of what it is that they want to do.
And they're very educated on food.
Unbelievably educated on food. Yeah. So this is, yeah, this is not. I look at this in a very different way, and a lot of the people we speak to, this is not. Look, I was a banker in London, and I always fancied being a pastry chef. Somebody coming and they go from working in a bank to working in a kind of bakery. That's happening less and less. There may be an investor, but the quality of expertise that's being brought to those types of enterprise now is just it's at a really very high level.
It is,
and it's so that means it's diverse, it's exciting, it's massively competitive. So not every brilliant idea succeeds, and look, we feel that because we invest our effort and energy into things that don't always go to plan.
But it's good that happens.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Because you learn.
Sure. No, I agree, and both for the people who are beginning these businesses, but also us as I suppose a component part of the overall kind of food service environment. We learn, what to look for,
right.
How to support, where people begin to either really take off and succeed, and what that means for us, how we have to support that, and where people begin to struggle. So it's just a hugely dynamic environment. Incredible environment, really. Incredible environment. Really.
So, Steve, now we've come to the quick fire questions of the show.
Sure.
And the first two questions are specifically for you. First things first. Which one do you prefer? Haggis or Cranachan?
It's got to be haggis, right? It's got to be haggis.
Next one. Special one for you again. Arbroath Smokies or smoked salmon?
So it would, again, be Arbroath Smokies because I was brought up on that stuff. So I think smoked salmon in those days was kind of seen as something that was kind of effete or elite. But I still, so we call it yalla fish. But yeah, I love that. Love that.
Do you have them in Chef Middle East?
We don't.
We need to get them in. We need to get them in.
I could see myself becoming a key customer or a key account on that basis.
Now, from your perspective right now, what would you say are your top 3 cuisines to eat?
So I think something that's really been developed in me in the last 4 or 5 years in this country has just been the increase in Asian cuisine and how that's at all sorts of different levels, how that's evolved. So I think there are a number of different restaurants that I think do it really very, very well. They're just different, they're distinct, they do really well. I think that the pace or the number of Asian, Pan-Asian, Asian influence restaurants is it's huge. Even compared to 4, 5, 6 years ago, it's changed rapidly. So I'd say that's something that I think is
so Asian
is really important, and something that's important for us. I still have this sort of strange hankering every Sunday to kind of go and immerse myself in Yorkshire puddings and roast beef.
Very good.
And I think the other, I don't know if you'd classify this as Asian or not, but I really enjoy Indian food, and I've, in all different parts of the city, I've experienced really interesting sort of takes on what. Yeah, I mean, if you look at this country, there are so many Indian expats here, and it's I think it's evolved again at all spectrums of the kind of the restaurant ecosystem. You have, I think, some really interesting stuff.
Yeah, there's amazing going on.
Yeah.
So then, who would you say are your top 3 culinary heroes?
So this is a story we didn't get to. I think so from a chef's perspective. So one of my experiences for a little while was me and one of the salespeople in the first food service business in the UK I worked for were involved in the supply chain for aubergine in Chelsea, and didn't see an awful lot of Gordon Ramsay, but saw an awful lot of Marcus Waring, and was just astonished by how not just talented he was, but his ability to bring people with him. And the thing I loved about those businesses, and there were a few of them like that at that time, was they were like an elite team. They were like a performance unit. They were like Navy SEALs in a kitchen.
Especially back then, aubergine Ramsay. I mean, that whole story is phenomenal. Anyway.
Yeah. So much wearing. I think my grandfather and my grandmother, because they kind of I think instilled this piece that was simple. It can actually be great, and I suppose third culinary hero. I think, look, it's these are again people who I know in life. It would be my brother, because he spends so much time and is so engaged with food. So he bakes bread, he barbecues, he grills, he spends a lot of time cooking and playing around with food. So and we're blessed, because we in the business we see so many chefs, so it's almost difficult to pick those guys out. But the guys you're really connected to, whom it becomes a part of them, who are not necessarily related to food in the way that perhaps I am as a it's every day of my working life. To see the kind of passion that they have for feeding other people, for entertaining other people, is an inspiration in itself.
So then, Steve, I'm going to ask you a very difficult question. Who's in the entire business, what is your favourite department?
Has to be marketing.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. I was going to say, if you don't, okay. It's either those or finance, one or the two. Apart or your exec chef, I know he's. Yeah.
No, I mean, but in the business,
yeah. But it is all about the people, and that's what I love, Steve. Is that you're such a people person, and I think that's a very fortunate thing for the business itself.
No, I think if you ask the guys who worked in the business, they'd probably say, "He's a grumpy old bugger."
Yeah.
but the bit that I think all the team work on is how do we make this better for the people who we work for?
Yeah.
For the customer who we service, and that I think is We've touched on this. It's an important part of what we do, but it's kind of this. It's a kind of an honourable or admirable objective that most of the people inside the business really chase after.
Okay. So then, the penultimate question is: what advice would you give 16-year-old Steve Pyle?
Yeah, don't drink so much. I think it's more self-belief. It's more. you know, don't give up on the things you think are important, and just try more. Try to, just try different things. I think if I look particularly in my 20s, the world was a very different place then. It's like a real kind of sort of octogenarian here. But I think if I look at the people I work with now who are in their 20s and early 30s, and they are the span of the things that they are prepared to try, to do, to see, to taste, to travel to, that maybe it was about opportunity, but even just mindset. I think I wish at that point in my life I'd probably been, I'd been less, I'd probably put barriers in the way myself rather than just say, okay, just have a go at that.
Love that. The last question, again, you will be able to answer this amazingly, I know. For any young chefs or F&B professionals, what advice would you give them on human connection?
Whatever it is that attracts you to this sometimes crazy business that is F&B, so nourish that passion. Learn more, expose yourself to more products, more people, more concepts, and do not be afraid to ask questions, because I think of anybody, because I think that curiosity is really the thing that drives your expertise in the end. It drives your ability to connect. It drives your ability to perform. So don't be afraid to ask what you might think are daft questions, but if it helps, then ask, and don't be afraid to ask. Just find a way to kind of fuel your passion through curiosity.
Now, I just want to say, Steve, for all of the social media aspect point of view, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all of the links to yourself, to Crave, to Chef Middle East in the show notes, number one. And I just wanted to have a little recap of what we've discussed, because I think it's been phenomenal and really insightful. So from your childhood with the fish and the grandparents, I think is amazing, to then, naturally going into hospitality. I think it's also amazing that you did law and politics, which has done you well, I believe. Then, of course, Chef Middle East, the entire journey of you being here within this whole 10 years of what you've achieved, what the team are doing, the expansion, the acquisitions, speciality ranges, the sustainability purposes, the human connection, I think is a huge one, the growth and how you see the future. On a personal perspective, I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to be here. It has been amazing, and I just want to say I cannot wait to see the expansion of Chef Middle East and the team. And honestly, thank you very, very much for being here.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for your time, James.